Because I will be away from class today, I'm making this brief video to assist you with the assignment that you must complete by the end of the period. Make sure you watch it carefully and use it to complete your assignment. Good luck. So having reviewed what you handed in recently in that handout, I noticed a lot of you had trouble with questions that look like the one you can see on the screen here. So I'm just going to review with you how you do this. So as you should have gotten down in your notes from the PowerPoint, the first step we do is that we divide the shape up into basic figures. So when I do that for this shape, and I'll use a different color to do that, when I do that for this shape, I have here, maybe I'll use yellow. Okay, I have here a rectangle. Here's a rectangle. And also I have here, and I'll use a different color for that, maybe blue, a semicircle. Rectangle and semicircle are the two shapes that I'm going to be working with, and I need to use my formula sheet to find the formulas for those two figures. My second step is to identify the figures as A1 and A2, so I'll make this one A1 and this one here will be A2. Okay, once I've separated my shape into two basic figures, I've labeled them, I then need to determine if there are any missing sides that I need to know. Now I know for a semicircle or any kind of circle I need to find the radius, and this is where a lot of people made mistakes. The radius is going to be from the midpoint here to the end. Alright? So from the edge of the circle to the midpoint, and that is going to be half of this value here. Okay, because this one's 20, and to the midpoint from the edge of the semicircle or circle to the middle is going to make this 10, half of that. So 10 millimeters. Okay, so now that I've determined any missing sides that I need to know, I can now write my total area equation. So I write A total equals A1 plus A2. Okay, now I can solve each shape. So A1, oops. Now I can solve each shape. I'll do A1 here. A1 equals length times width. Why is it length times width? Because it's a rectangle. Some people did length times width for every single shape, but length times width is the formula only for the rectangle. And I can substitute my values now, 30 for the length times 20 for the width, and that gives me an answer of 600 millimeters squared. Now I can do A2. A2 is a semicircle. So the formula for a circle is pi r squared, and for a semicircle it is pi r squared divided by 2. How do I find half of anything? I divide by 2. So then I substitute pi, remember radius is 10, not 20, because the radius is half of the diameter. The diameter of this circle that we're seeing here, or this semicircle that we're seeing here, half of the diameter is 10, the full diameter is 20. That's how I get the radius as 10. I got to make sure I put my square there. Okay, divide by 2. That gives me pi 100 divided by 2. Then I need to calculate pi times 100, which is going to give me 314. Second pi times 100, 314.159. So my next line I write 314.159 divided by 2. And then when I divide that by 2, I get 157.07. Now I can substitute into my total area equation. I get 600. Oh, I should have mentioned my units of measurement here, so millimeter squared. Here I get 600 plus 157.07, and that gives me 757.07 millimeters squared. Okay, so review the steps that I just took to get this. First, I divided up my shape. I recognized that I have a rectangle, and I recognize that I have a semicircle. I then labeled my shape A1, A2. I then made a total area equation. Area total equals A1 plus A2. I then solved for area 1. I then solved for area 2. I then substituted in the values for area 1 and area 2 into my area total equation, and I get my final answer. Alright, so students also struggled with questions that look like the one you can see on the screen here. And basically, to solve this, we're going to follow the exact same method that we did to solve the other question. And that method is we start by dividing our shape into basic figures. So we have one figure here which is a rectangle. So I have a rectangle, and I also have a triangle. Let me use a different color for that so we can distinguish it. We also have a triangle. Those are my two basic figures. Now, I'm going to label my figures A1 and A2. A1, A2. And after I've done that, I got to think, is there any lines or sides that I need to know? And I need to know the height of this triangle. And how can I find the height of this triangle? Well, if this side here is 12, and this one here is 8, then this line here is going to be the difference between 12 and 8. So I would do 12 minus 8 in order to find the height of the triangle. So 12 minus 8, and that gives us 4. So the height of the triangle is 4 feet. Now that I know the height of the triangle, I can write my total area formula. So I get A total equals A1 plus A2. Now I can solve each of those shapes. A1 is a rectangle, so I get length times width. The length is 24, and I'm going to multiply that by the width, which is 8. And 24 times 8 gives me 192 feet squared. So I've done A1, now I can do area 2. Area 2 is a triangle, so the formula is base times height divided by 2. The base, we can see, is right here, and the base is 24 feet. So I write 24 times the height we determined here was 4, so 24 times 4. Oops, 24 times 4 divided by 2, and then 24 times 4 is going to give us 96 over 2. 96 divided by 2 is going to give us 48, and so this is 40 feet squared. Now I can plug those into my total area formula over here. I get 192 plus 48, and that will give me 240 feet squared. Alright, so third problem we'll work on looks like this. You have a question like this on the assignment that you worked on. We're going to go through all the steps again. Steps haven't changed, they're exactly the same. The first thing I do is identify my shapes. Here's my first shape, it's a triangle. My other shape is a semicircle. After I've identified my shapes, I'm going to label them area 1 and area 2. So A1, A2. Then I need to think, are there any lines, lengths, or sides that I need to know to solve this? Well, in order to find the area of a semicircle, I need to know the radius. So the radius is going to always be half of the diameter. I can see the diameter here is 6. Therefore, the radius, which would go from the center of the circle to its edge, is going to be half of that, and therefore it is 3 centimeters. Okay, so now that I've identified the missing length, I can now write my total area formula, which is going to be area total equals A1 plus A2. And I'll come back to that. Now I'm going to solve area 1. Area 1 is a triangle, so that's base times height. Sorry for the messy writing. I'll try that again. Base times height divided by 2. The base is 6. You can see the base here. Base is 6. And the height, which can be seen over here, is 8. So 6 times 8 divided by 2. 6 times 8 equals 48. Divided by 2 gives me 24 centimeters squared. And I've solved area 1. Now I can solve area 2. Area 2 is a semicircle. So my formula is going to be pi r squared divided by 2. Half of anything. To get half of anything, we divide by 2. The radius, if you recall, we identified as being 3. So 3 squared, pi 3 squared divided by 2. 3 squared gives me 9. Pi 9 divided by 2. We do pi 9 in our calculator, and we get 28.274, and divided by 2. Oh, I got too messy there. Can't quite fit. Divided by 2. And then our next line, we do the division by 2, and we get 14.137 centimeters squared. Now we can take the area 1 answer that we got, which is here, and the area 2 answer we got, and we're going to plug them into our total area formula up here. So area 1 was 24, so we put those in, 24 plus 14.137, which is going to give us 38.137 centimeters squared, or I could round it to the nearest tenth, gives me 38.1 centimeters squared. Okay, so this is the last question I'll do. Same thing we did with all the others. We divide the shape up. You could divide the shape up in more than one way. Right now, I'm going to divide it up like so. Okay, so I've divided it into 2 different rectangles. After I've divided it into 2 rectangles, I'm now going to label it A1 and A2. I then see, are there any sides that I need to know? And yes, there are. I need to know this side here so I can calculate the area of that rectangle. And I can find that area, or sorry, that length, because this is 10 here, and this is 6 here. So this line here is going to be the difference between 10 and 6. The difference, we mean subtraction. 10 minus 6 will tell me the length of this line here. 10 minus 6 gives me 4, so I can write here 4 centimeters. Now I know the width of that rectangle, and I'll be able to solve it. So now that I've identified any unknown lengths or sides that I need to know, I can now write my total area formula. Area total equals A1 plus A2. And now I'm going to solve area 1 and area 2. So area 1, it's a rectangle, so I use length times width. The length is 9. The width is 4. 9 times 4 gives me 36 centimeters squared. Area 2. If I look at area 2, it has a length of 6 and a width of 2. So I'm going to write in length times width because it's a rectangle. The length is 6 times 2 equals 12 centimeters squared. And then now I've got the area 1 area, I got the area 2 area, I got to add those together. I substitute them into my area total, and then I get 36 plus 12, which gives me 48 centimeters squared. Okay, reviewing that again one more time. I divided up my shape into 2 rectangles. Here's rectangle 1, here's rectangle 2. I labeled them A1, A2. I found the missing side. I needed to know the width of this rectangle to be able to solve for the area. I then write my total area equation. A total equals A1 plus A2. I then solve A1 and I got 36 centimeters squared. I then solve A2 and I got 12 centimeters squared. I then substitute those values in for A1, 36, for A2, 12. 36 plus 12 gives me 48. The answer is 48 centimeters squared.